Let's talk for a minute. So if you've been to a court that has more than perhaps 2 members of the populace of Mooneschadowe, in the last, I don't know, 15 years or longer, you have probably heard the cry, "Hail MOG." And you heard it right, "Hail MOG." That's what they say. Invariably someone will receive an award, and they're either Moonshadine or Friends of Mooneschadowe, and you will hear the heralds say, for the latest recipient of whatever the award is, "Vivat," and the audience will scream, "Vivat," and then in the background someone will go, "Hail MOG," and anyone who has ever, pretty much anyone who's ever set foot on Mooneschadowe grounds will reply with, "Hail MOG!" As something of a personal note, I remember explaining how that little challenge and reply went to Duke Mahadi, and we were actually at a party hosted in Mooneschadowe, and he'd heard a couple people say it in the background, heard a couple people chant it in court one time, and he asked me, "So what is this?" And I said, it's the challenge. It's our challenge and reply. And he goes, "How's it work?" And I go, "Simply, you walk out there and you go, 'Hail MOG,' you'll get a reply." And he goes, "So I could just do it right now?" "Yeah, go ahead." So he goes out on the back step. No warning, no draw for attention. He just randomly goes, "Hail MOG." And the earth shook as like all 105 something people in that house and backyard replied, "Hail MOG." And he came back in with his eyes this wide. And he goes, "You were right." But that does lead to a question of where does that come from? Because there's actually an interesting bit of history there. So Hail MOG actually starts, roughly speaking, there's not a hard date you can stick on it, but we know that it was nominally the year 1996. Now understand, I started playing in fall of 97. And when I showed up, the seneschal was Alaric von Thorn. And Alaric, he cut quite the presence. He's not a very tall man, but he's very German. And when he processed in, we were a little more ceremonial back then, a little more formal. He would process in with his officers to populace meetings. And he would square his shoulders and straighten his back, and he'd have his fists balled up and at his sides. And he oftentimes wore his coat of plates, which was very ornate. It had brass lions' heads with chains hanging off of them, and the plates had, I believe, brass rivets. So it was actually a very striking piece of garb on top of functional body armor. And several times he wore a mantle cloak. A matter of fact, there were a few times where he would strut in, and the assembled people would start humming the Imperial March, because the parallels to Darth Vader are not lost on us there. Now you have to understand about the way the populace meetings were run in Mooneschadowe in fall of 97 and into 98, and pretty much most of the duration of his tenure as seneschal. The image he presented in the populace meetings was one of a very, very autocratic, high-born ruler. In modern terms, he might almost be accused of being dictatorial in his displayed attitudes and his proclamations. Now, you have to understand, let me be very clear about this. This was all acting. This was very much a stage presentation. Even I, 2 months into the SCA, understood that this was all an act. But the act left a very striking impression on everyone. Even people who've been playing for years. It inspired confidence. It could inspire action. He was this rock-solid pillar that the officer corps, in appearance anyway, was built around. And he very much had this overlord image. Now, fast forward a few months, And for a number of reasons, I went to a couple of officer meetings. I wasn't an officer myself, but the populace was encouraged to go, and I was nosy. And I wasn't the only non-officer there by any stretch of the imagination. But I got to see how things worked, for lack of better terms, behind the curtain. There was nothing clandestine about this, but the officer meetings with Ulrich are very actually they're very conversational, and it was very much a, we need to, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, I can meet you halfway. And if there was a difference in opinion about how things should be approached, he was very good about squaring people up so that we got to facts and didn't let opinions run the gambit. It was very much a, look, this is our goal. Here's how we want to get to it. We need to meet in the middle. And it was, the reality was that he was a very engaged, very, what's the best word for it? He was a very interactive leader, a very good administrator and leader, I will add. In the years since, I've come to lean back on what I saw of what he displayed there in some of my own decision making, both as an SCAer and an officer in the SCA. He was just a phenomenal figure, but that image that he cultivated, dramatically, of course, in the populist meetings, it kind of colored how everyone saw the group, and within the group, and it colored them in kind of a joking way. They called it the overlord government. And then someone somewhere, I honestly don't remember, I don't even know if I was ever told who it was, said, it's the Mooneschadowe overlord government. And that, of course, being a mouthful, and Ulrich being a bit of a military mind, and like most military nuts, myself included, kind of in love with acronyms, said and adopted the word MOG. And before I had joined, this had taken in, but it really started to find its teeth and sink in and become a thing right around fall of '97. I think, I know I heard it at my first populist meeting, but it was kind of the cheer of Hail Mog, and kind of our local version of Vivat. Now, it kind of fell out of use after Ulrich stepped down, because of course he is the overlord, the figure of the overlord. And with the next seneschal and all the seneschals since then, each had a different flavor and a different temperament and a different approach to leadership. So there wasn't the overlord. There wasn't the overlord to have the Mooneschadowe overlord government until, now truth be told, this started only a few years later, but we'll get to that in a second. There was, at the time, a policy where events were scheduled by the status of the group. Baronies got perpetual dates on the calendar. Shires and cantons didn't. You had to schedule as soon as the calendar opened up, which I think was about a year out. And there was a year where, I want to say we were 5 months out, maybe closer, where I believe the Crown had been forced to reschedule a Crown tournament, and because at the time a date couldn't conflict with a Crown event, that bumped a barony off the date they had reserved, and they, using their seniority as a barony, bumped the nearest shire off their date. Well, that was us. We were 5 months out, and all of a sudden we lost our event date. Now, not to worry, we got it fixed. It wasn't too big a deal, but there were some hard feelings. And I remember when I was with several members of the group when we found out by phone call, email and social media were not a thing at that point, at least not in Mooneschadowe. This would have been about maybe 99, 2000, maybe. And one of the players said, we should just become a province, get the baronial level status so we can get our PED, and then not have to deal with a hat race. And that was the first I'd ever heard of province myself. If you want to know what a province is, in short, it is a group that has baronial level precedence and activity level, but it does not have a baron and baroness. And that's the textbook definition. You can look it up in society law, corpora. But that was about where the movement started. Now, I will say, without getting into too much detail, Some kingdom level players pretty much had an existential crisis when they found out that this very old, very active group in the north did not want to go to be a barony. It, it I was there. I was part of it. I really think it is for the members of Mooneschadowe who still play there to tell the story. But I can comfortably say, as someone who was there, that there were members of the society, especially in the central region, who were absolutely gobsmacked at the idea. It wasn't that they were annoyed. It wasn't that they were bothered by it. They honestly, there were statements made where they honestly felt like we were somehow a threat to the existence of the SCA. That is how insane some opinions were about us becoming a province. Now, the one thing I can tell you about Mooneschadowe, nothing is going to band any group together, let alone Mooneschadowe, faster than telling you or telling them they can't do something. Saying you're not allowed or setting an impossibly high bar with Mooneschadowe is the fastest way to not only band us together, but to make us do it. So and it kind of waxed and waned. There were some starts and stops, but probably around 2004 was when we put our nose to the grindstone and said, we are going to become a province. And there was a membership drive because we wanted super healthy numbers. There was a lot more eventing for us. We wanted to get out, get the word out. We wanted people to know who Mooneschadowe was. There was a little more spring in the step, a little more ceremony in the populist meetings. And with all of that, the call of Hail MOG was resurrected. And every populist meeting was again opened with the normal heraldry ceremony. I know I was the populist herald for a great many of them. And the herald never called Hail MOG, but someone else, as soon as I was done with my opening statements or my closing statements, someone from the audience would go, Hail MOG, and that was it. The ground would shake as everyone in the room would cheer Hail MOG with it. Any court held in Mooneschadowe lands, someone in the audience, the moment they called a vivat, anything affirmative for Mooneschadowe, Hail MOG, Hail MOG, and 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 people would cheer. It was a political rallying cry for the populace. Now, we were elevated to provincial status in about 2006, as I recall. And I can tell you that following that, the meaning and the use and the connotations of Hail MOG definitely shifted. Frankly, there were a lot of members who used it from 2002 to 2006 who couldn't have told you. They didn't know where Hail MOG came from. They'd never heard of Alaric or they'd never heard of Alaric as a senator. They'd never seen his style of government. It had long since morphed away from Mooneschadowe overlord government into kind of its own definition. Now, to this day, it is a rallying call for the province of Mooneschadowe, which I am no longer a resident of. And it is still called out in courts. If anyone, Mooneschadowe is in court, and there's another Moonshadine in the audience, and there's a vivat associated with whatever the presentation is, the moment they say vivat whoever, it's almost a guarantee someone in the audience is going to cry, Hail MOG! And you could tell who is Moonshadine or who is friends with Mooneschadowe because the next heartbeat there's going to be this thunderous Hail MOG. Now, as to what Hail MOG means now and to what it stands for and to what type of emotions it invokes, that's something you really need to talk to the current players in Mooneschadowe. I don't play there anymore, so I am removed from the group and I'm not current on what that part of the culture involves. But it didn't stop there, though. I've talked about it in my other videos as well. Hail MOG definitely is the longest standing and was the first, at least in the north of Onsteor, to have any sort of political rallying cry like that. But North Keep did eventually start with brick house. I believe it was Montega and her husband, whose name escapes me, I'm sorry, but when they were on the thrones of North Keep, um, you would hear him call brick, and all the North Keepers would go house, brick house, alluding to North Keep Castle. Um, I know Wiesenfeuer's tried a few times. We're trying to resurrect a few calls of our own. Work in progress. Check in with me in a few months. Namron does the whoosh because, of course, evocative of the pile wavy or the tornado charge. And to be clear, such displays, such calls, such rallying cries, they're not strictly modern. We can document those type of calls or that style, that flavor of populist outreach and rallying and ooh rah rah, however you want to phrase it, well into the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries. We know that similar type chants existed in Rome because those are documented by the historians from that period. So it's as strange and as weird and sometimes modern as it sounds. It's perfectly period. It's a perfect SCA-ism. So could I talk more about Hail Mog? Yes, I absolutely could. I lived in Mooneschadowe for over 2 decades. I know a lot about Mooneschadowe. I know a lot about Hail Mog. But I just wanted to give everyone who has heard Hail Mog a little bit of the history and a little bit of understanding of where it comes from. And if you do want to know more, if you do want to know what it means now, where it comes from now, what type of emotions, what type of thoughts it evokes, and how much the people even know about it, you need to talk to a Moonshadine. Go talk to someone from the Province of Mooneschadowe and ask them about it, because when you call attention to yourself, you're inviting questions. Well, this is your chance to go ask a question or two. So that's my little bit of history for this. Look forward to seeing all of you the next chance I get. Until then, see you at the next event. Goodbye, and God bless.